Remember the talk, that super awkward, uncomfortable, cringy conversation with your parents you had about your changing body, dating, and everything else? I remember how awkward it was for both them and me, and I still don't know who had it worse. And then remember that video or assembly about sex ed in middle school, which got everyone in hysterical laughter? Thing is, these tough topics and conversations are super important. Whether it's about your body, your gender, your relationships, your safety, we all know of so many incidents of abuse, for example, that could have been avoided with just awareness. And that's why we've got Miss Cynthia in the house today. She's a part of Amaze, a digital media platform with great resources for parents, educators, and healthcare providers around the globe to communicate effectively and honestly with their teens. So thank you, Miss Cynthia, for being here and doing this.
Hi, Ariane. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here and for this conversation.
The pleasure is ours. So let's start with Amaze. It sounds like a great go-to for all those tough topics and conversations, from gender identity to consent to safety. So who's it for and how does one use this resource?
Yes, that's a great question. So, Amaze is a project that is led by Advocates for Youth, a nonprofit that's based in Washington, D.C., but we're implemented in collaboration with partners around the world. And what we do is that we provide access to comprehensive sexuality education via fun animated videos that are typically 2 to 3 minutes long and that cover a large array of topics pertaining to sexuality education. So we cover things like puberty and emotional and physical changes associated with that stage. We also talk about healthy relationships, digital safety. We talk about contraception, STI prevention, HIV prevention, and just so many, many other things that you can learn about through our website or through our YouTube channel. We have resources for young adolescents, ages 10 to 14, but we also have a lot of content dedicated for educators and parents. And when it comes to educators, we have a variety of lesson plans and activities involving the use of Amaze that will help them teach sexuality education to their students. And then for parents, we have also a lot of content on our website that helps them start having open and honest conversations with their children about sexuality, about things that they're curious about, and just for parents that are interested in being better equipped to handle the questions that are sometimes presented by their children. So we hope that our website and our digital content not only reaches young adolescents, but also the adults in their lives.
Wow, no, that's very comprehensive. You're really trying to reach out to everyone.
Yes, that's the goal. We believe that through information, people are going to be better equipped and more empowered to make decisions about what's best for them and what's best for their lives. So we just want to make sure that everyone or as many people as possible has access to that very critical information.
So now the talk, it's something everyone involved, from the parents to the educators to the children, feel awkward about. So how can parents and teachers make this conversation less awkward? And can you suggest some good cue words or a good tone of voice to have, or maybe even conversation starters?
Yeah, of course. So the talk is something that comes up a lot, and people often refer to it as, the birds and the bees conversation. And something that we believe here at Amaze is that it shouldn't only be one talk. Like we should not be talking about having just one isolated experience with children whereby you provide, just spit a bunch of information and expect them to actually digest it and learn from it. So we really think it's important to move away from that notion of having a single conversation to embracing more of like an open dialogue and inviting, or welcoming talks at various points in time. So, the type of questions that your child at 5 may have are not going to be the same as, what the questions that they're going to have when they're 10 or 12 or 15. So it really depends on their age, the way you bring this up, and also the type of responses that you would give to your children or the types of topics that you're going to talk to them about. So some of the things that I recommend in terms of tips when you're thinking about having a conversation with your child is to first make sure that you're creating a space that feels safe, that feels affirming and positive, so that your child is able to feel comfortable and can actually talk to you or ask questions to you directly or follow up on something that isn't clear. Second of all, I think this is probably the most important one, which is that you need to educate yourself first. You should always, make sure that you reach for information that is scientifically accurate and that is age appropriate. So you want to make sure that you're looking for resources, perhaps like Amaze, that will guarantee that the information you're delivering to your child is truthful and accurate. And then at the same time, we suggest that it's really normal for parts of these conversations to be awkward. So it's important to acknowledge that awkwardness, but also not end it there, like not stopping the conversation there, but acknowledging sometimes you're uncomfortable. You can say something like, I know this may not be what you want to talk about right now, or I know this word, but here's why I think we should talk about. And then that expresses vulnerability on your side as a parent. And then also it allows your child to feel for you in a way and be willing to work with you through that conversation. In terms of conversation starters, I think we have plenty of suggestions in terms of language you can use on our website, amaze.org. And these are typically divided up by topics. So you can find conversation starters for if you're having a conversation with your child about relationships and about what constitutes a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship, or puberty, what are the types of changes that people go through and things like that. So there's so many ideas, but I think most importantly, it's about creating that safe space, educating yourself, and being honest, while acknowledging the awkwardness of parts of that conversation or those conversations.
This is so useful, to have all this advice, for parents. And so we hope there are parents out there that are listening to this,
Yeah, I hope so too.
And also it's so important that there's a safe space to discuss these things, otherwise it's like, the child has to figure out from other resources, and that never leads to anything good.
Exactly. There's so much misinformation online, and there's content that can be misleading and can eventually, lead to negative attitudes about your body, about your sexuality. And those are things we want to avoid. We want to make sure that young people feel like they shouldn't be embarrassed about, learning these topics, and they should be able to approach their parents, and their parents should be able to approach their children. So we really have to, through having these open conversations, eventually we're going to reduce the stigma around sexuality education and around sexual health in general, which is super important because it will impact the lives.
Can you get an STI but not have symptoms? Oh, I bet Amaze has a video for this. Yep, here it is. Wow, Amaze has everything. I wonder, who's behind all this great info? Amaze.org. More info, less weird. It's no surprise young people have questions about STIs, relationships, and their bodies. When sex education means awkward lessons and embarrassing questions without honest, age-appropriate answers from trusted sources, young people are left in the dark, turning to misinformation online, pornography, and myths that other kids share. That's where Amaze comes in. An engaging, trusted resource making sexuality education universally available to the YouTube generation. Our flagship YouTube channel alone has over 50 million views. With multiple video series and distribution platforms, Amaze has evolved into a large international community of teens, educators, and parents. Amaze leverages the expertise of sexuality educators, the creativity of animation professionals, input from our youth advisors, and the power of the internet to create and share free educational resources.
That's true.
I've learned so much, from relationships to gender identity and sexual orientation to what to expect at the doctor's office. Amaze has over 200 videos, but our programming is more than just videos. Amaze provides lesson plans for schools, content and tools for parents and allies, integration into healthcare systems, and even a coloring book and comic. Parents love Amaze too, with many resources to help get through awkward conversations and become askable parents. That explains why my parents stopped saying, "Jane, there are birds and there are bees." Now they give me real information that I actually care about. Amaze is an open platform where we welcome and support global partners as they adapt, integrate, and disseminate Amaze resources to their audiences. Together, we can change the world and help young people build happy and healthy futures. Now, let's find out more.
This is the most important thing that we have to say here. And we want to talk about sexual harassment and abuse. It's the worst thing possible. And the scary part of it is that you never know where or who or how it's going to happen. So how can someone protect themselves? And if it's happened, how can someone deal with it? How can someone, reach out?
Yeah, you're right, Ariane, in the sense that sexual harassment and sexual abuse are things that you never want to wish upon anyone. It's horrible, and it's very hard to recover from negative experiences involving harassment and abuse. It's really important, in order to protect yourself, to first understand what these topics are and how they're defined, and to be able to see the signs and differentiate between the two things, and differentiate between what's a joke and what's harassment, what's teasing and what's, what crosses the line. So I think maybe starting off with sexual harassment, it's important to define it. And the way we see it is it's a form of bullying that is intended to hurt somebody or intimidate somebody. And it can include things like verbal harassment, such as having or sexual jokes or comments that are unwanted, or also physical harassment in the forms of inappropriate gestures or touching that's inappropriate. And it can also, in some instances, be seen as pressuring someone to share pictures that are sexual in nature, or starting rumors about somebody related to their sexuality. And so one thing to realize about this is that it's never okay to be harassed, or sexual harassment is never okay under any circumstances. And it's important to know what it is, so that your behavior doesn't affect other people and you're not affected. You're not living through experiences of sexual harassment and not knowing what it is. So it's really important to understand those behaviors. And if someone is sexually harassed, it's never the person's fault. No one has a right to bully someone or harass someone. And if you are being harassed, something you can do is say, "Please stop. I don't like this. I don't appreciate this. You're harassing me." And if that behavior does not end, then we recommend talking to a trusted adult. You can find someone like a parent or a relative that you trust, or a teacher or a coach, and just keep telling them until it stops, or please ask them for help. And if the harassment is happening at school, which is often the case, it's important also to seek an adult that works in the school. So somebody like a guidance counselor or a nurse, or somebody that works in the admin section of your school, and then find help that way. So it's important to follow those steps when it comes to harassment. Then when it comes to sexual abuse, that's defined by us as any kind of sexual behavior or touching of another person without their consent. That to us is considered sexual assault or sexual abuse. And it's important to know that it's also never that person's fault. The person experiencing abuse is never at fault. And no matter, what they're doing, what they're wearing, where they were, it's not that person's fault. And another thing to consider, to know, is that when a person has been consuming alcohol, for example, it doesn't make abuse their fault either, because they're not consenting when a person has been drinking. You're not consenting the same way that you would if you were. It's so important to talk about this, because I think what happens a lot is that people that have experienced abuse can feel shame, and it's something that our culture has perpetuated by making the victim feel at fault for that experience, and it should never be that way. And it even sometimes it's conflicting because humans are sexual creatures, so you might experience sexual abuse, but at the same time you might have felt pleasure sometimes, and so it's conflicting for that person that experienced that abuse because of that dichotomy, that parallel situation. So to prevent sexual abuse, it's important to recognize it for what it is and know that it can happen to anybody, and if it does, seeking a trusted adult is super important, because you're not alone, and you should never have to deal with this on your own.
So
Yeah.
some people may be embarrassed or ashamed to discuss it. How would they, like specifically teenagers, but how would they overcome the embarrassment and the shame?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, as adults, our responsibility to make sure that young people feel comfortable enough to come forward. And so it's not just the young person having to overcome that fear by themselves. Like that's not fair to put on one single person, a young person that has already experienced something difficult and potentially very traumatizing. So it's important for adults to be able to create that safe space first and foremost. And then for young people, really knowledge is what empowers people, I believe. And so just making sure that you understand what the signs are, and you know that what you're experiencing is called sexual harassment or it's called sexual abuse, you're gonna be able to more easily come forward, having been able to make that distinction between what you're experiencing and something else.
It was fantastic having you here today.
Thank you, Aryan. Of course.